Advertisements. Mentessa is a social learning platform that allows employees to easily connect and learn from each other. Mentessa helps you to welcome new employees. Share your expertise, learn new skills, take charge of your career, get to know your colleagues better, connect informally with your team, and see what skills and superpowers each team member has through the employee directory. Find the right person for the job, boost employee productivity, and empower them to instantly find the right person to talk to with built-in chat and automated scheduling. Create a sense of community in the workplace, encourage team bonding, and increase engagement by automating workplace rituals. Unleash your team's potential. Save time and effort with ready-to-use templates and transform your organization with proven strategies for employee mentoring, onboarding, offboarding, and upskilling. Find out more at www.mentessa.com.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Loeb, Avi Loeb. You are an Israeli-American theoretical physicist. You work on astrophysics and cosmology, and you're a professor of science at Harvard University. And before we start and dive into the topics about science and physics, I wanted to know actually like what motivated you like originally to become a physicist and to dive into these topics, and like why chose physics next to other topics.
Thank you for having me. I was born on a farm, and at a young age I was mostly interested in philosophy and the biggest questions we have. And but I was also born in Israel, and at age 18 I had to serve in the military, and the only intellectual work that was close to pursuing philosophy was physics, and I finished my PhD in physics. And then I was offered an appointment in astrophysics at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, and I accepted it because it was impossible to refuse it. And eventually I was offered a professor position at the Harvard University, and I was tenured there. And at that point it became clear to me that even though it was an arranged marriage by circumstances, that I'm actually married to my true love, because there are fundamental questions about the universe that are philosophical in origin that we can address using the scientific method. And I'm very glad that I ended as an astrophysicist, but it was a convoluted path. And despite that, it actually offers me an advantage, because I am not a typical practitioner of physics or astrophysics, and I think about the big picture, about the important questions, and that makes me different from my colleagues. At the same time, I'm different from philosophers in the sense that I'm using the scientific method to answer questions and basing them on evidence, on experimental data. So altogether, it allowed me to arrive at a place that I'm very happy about right now. And I've been working on black holes, on the first stars in the universe, but most recently about the search for intelligent life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I think it's really important to talk about that, because people really are interested in the origins of life. Where does life come from, and is there also other life outside Earth, within the solar system, within the universe? You mentioned that in 2018 there was an unknown object coming into the solar system, which was called Oumuamua. And you mentioned in the papers and also in public that it might be from alien origin. Could you maybe explain why you thought and
Right.
yeah?
So this was an object discovered actually on October 19th, 2017 by a telescope in Hawaii called Pan-STARRS. And they spotted it passing close to Earth, about a fifth of the Earth-Sun separation, but it was moving so fast that it couldn't have been bound to the Sun. And so it was the first object identified as originating from outside the solar system. And of course, the natural expectation was to say, well, it's a rock of the same type as the asteroids or comets that we had seen in the solar system, except it came from another star. But as we collected more data about it, it appeared unfamiliar, very different from the objects that we are used to. It was different than a comet because there was no cometary tail. A comet is a rock that is covered with ice, and when it gets close to the sun, the ice evaporates. You end up with a tail made of gas and dust around it. And there was nothing visible. And moreover, the Spitzer Space Telescope looked very deeply around this object, Oumuamua, and couldn't trace any carbon-based molecules, so it was clearly not a comet. The object was called Oumuamua because this means scout in the Hawaiian language, so it was the first one. So then, in addition to that, as it was tumbling every 8 hours, the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10. And that meant that it has a very extreme shape, most likely pancake-like, flat shape, based on the variation of light at the 90% confidence. And then another very peculiar feature about this object is it was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force. And since there was no evaporation of this object, it couldn't be the rocket effect from a cometary tail. So the question was, what is pushing it? And the only thing I could think of was the reflection of sunlight. But for that, the object had to be very thin to have a large surface area for its mass, and sort of like a sail, except being pushed by light. And nature doesn't make such objects. And so I suggested maybe it's artificial. I wrote a scientific paper about it. It was accepted for publication within a few days, and there was a lot of pushback. And then 3 years later, the same telescope in Hawaii discovered another object that shared the same qualities. It was pushed away from the sun by reflecting sunlight, no cometary tail. And then a few weeks later, the astronomers realized, actually, this object that was also discovered by the same telescope is actually a rocket booster made of stainless steel that was launched in 1966 by NASA. And it had very thin walls. That's why it was pushed by reflecting sunlight. So here we know that the object is artificial because we produced it. The question is, who produced Oumuamua?
Okay, that's very interesting. So you do think, and you have talked about it a lot, that there is maybe alien life outside the solar system. Where do you think it is? Do you think it is possible that it's close, that it's within our reach, that it is way too far away? What are your takes on that?
Well, it's not just a matter of distance, because there is another dimension, which is time. And what we know is that most of the stars, like the sun, formed billions of years before the sun. They formed around 8 billion years ago, and the sun formed 4.6 billion years ago. So the sun is a late bloomer. And there are tens of billions of other stars just within the Milky Way galaxy that are similar to the sun. And we know that a significant fraction of them has a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same separation. So the dice of intelligence, like we have on Earth, was rolled tens of billions of times. And most likely, if there was a civilization, it predated us by billions of years. And it takes less than 500 million years to traverse the Milky Way galaxy with chemical rockets. So they had plenty of time to reach us. And I actually calculated that if we were to stop wasting money on military expenses and use it for space exploration, then the entire military budget of the world would be sufficient to send 1 million CubeSats to 20 stars every year. And so in 1 billion years, we could pretty much fill up all the habitable regions around all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy, tens of billions of them, with 1 million probes for each. And if one civilization can do that in 1 billion years, we may be living in such a reality. I'm not talking about many, just one that decides to be peaceful, explore space rather than fight within itself, as we do right now. And the question is, do we live in such a reality? And of course, the way to find out is to look through our telescopes. It's not a philosophical question. But what I'm trying to say is that the numbers are so vast that it's very likely that there was more than one, and most of them may be dead by now. They may not be around, but we can look for packages in our mailbox. And it's a different method than was used in the past, which was listening to a phone call, trying to wait until we get a phone call by trying to observe other stars and check if there is any radio signals coming from them. This is a completely different approach than searching for physical objects that visit the solar system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it is likely, do you think there are other possibilities? I mean, we talked about this, I talked about this with some guests in the podcast already, that Elon Musk, he has the idea with his SpaceX company to colonize other planets, to colonize the moon, colonize the Mars. Do you think that's also something that is necessary for civilization to survive, actually? That it's like spreading across the solar system to different planets?
Definitely. Well, first of all, let me also say that I think it's arrogant of us to think that we are the smartest, that we are the only ones. And it's a sign of modesty and being intelligent for us to explore, to see what's out there, because we may not be the smartest kid on the block. And the ambitions of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are mostly driven by commercial benefits, or also thinking that humans should go somewhere else. But the way I think of it is more from a scientific point of view. I think we should go out to, first of all, find if there is life out there, and second, also to extend the longevity of of humanity, of our species, because, for example, within 1 billion years, the sun will burn up the surface of the Earth, so we won't be able to stay here. There would not be any life here, and the same must have happened to other planets around other suns that formed more than 1 billion years before us. So we were not around to hear their cries for help. There must have been a mass exodus of those technological civilizations out of their home planet. It's not just a matter of Elon Musk, but it must have been a major political priority for them to leave their planet. But long before you are forced to leave your home because of a fire, you can decide to go elsewhere. And the argument is similar to the Gutenberg printing press. There were, before the printing press, there were small number of copies of the Bible that all were handwritten. And obviously, after the Gutenberg printing press came along, there were many more copies. So the risk of losing the content was reduced dramatically. And so in the same way, if you establish a human basis or basis of life, or even artificial intelligence, send artificial intelligence out to the universe that represents our flame of consciousness. Once we have sentient AI systems, we could send them as AI astronauts. Even just that would give us a better chance that something would survive beyond the lifespan of the sun, for example, here on Earth. So I think this would be a natural tendency, and you can imagine other civilizations seeding planets with life, or sending AI gadgets elsewhere that pursue their guiding principles. And we can imagine doing that as well in the coming decades.
Mm-hmm. A question that I would have that I'm really interested in is thinking, because you said it is possible, you think you are actually convinced that there are other civilizations across the universe, different planets. Do these civilizations look like us? Do they look like us? Would they be like the molecules, the biology, everything would develop comparable to the Earth, or how would that be?
That's an excellent question to which we don't know the answer because we only have one example here on Earth. But if I had to guess, I would say that there are examples of civilizations that are far more advanced than we are. They may not be around, they may have died by now, but they reached a higher level of technology. And the reason that I can imagine that is because our science and technology is only a century old. Just a century ago, we discovered quantum mechanics on which all the gadgets that we use are based. And 100 years is only one part in 100 million of the age of most stars. So if we are to meet another civilization, it's either much more primitive than we are or much more advanced than we are. The chance that they are exactly the same phase is quite small. And if they are more primitive, we have to board the ship and travel to their planet and start searching through the trees. And that's a lot of work. I don't think we will do that. If they are much more advanced than we are, they may visit us and we will realize that they have technologies far more advanced than we possess. So we can learn from them. And that's why I think that we should be modest. And we are probably in the middle of the class of intelligent civilizations. If you look at the news every day, there are many reasons to hope for improvement in our intelligence because we are wasting a lot of energy, a lot of effort fighting each other. Most of the time, humans are possessed with the ambition to demonstrate that they are superior relative to other groups of humans. And this is all a waste because if there is a smarter kid on our block, then all of our differences are really small and not significant, and we should treat each other as equal members of the human species.
I completely agree with you, and that is completely 100% my opinion. So how, in that context, how do you see the development of artificial intelligence? Because it is something that we experience right now that is becoming very big. We had ChatGPT, that's an app or from OpenAI that has been developed and is really advanced. I don't know if you have tried it out. I did, and it's really interesting to see the results. So how do you think AI is going to develop? What impact is it going to have?
Yeah, so I think that we are now getting close to the first revolution out of 3 that I can see in the coming century. And so the first revolution is the AI revolution, and in the sense that there would be sentient AI systems. And by sentient, I mean that billions of people will interact with those systems for many years and will not be able to tell the difference between a human and a machine. Okay, and I don't care if there is a fundamental difference or not. I mean, philosophers would argue forever because some people want to still feel superior relative to the machine, irrespective of anything. But my test is the same as Turing test. Basically, if a lot of people cannot tell the difference for a long time, then there is no difference as far as I'm concerned. And once you have AI systems that are sentient, society has to adjust because unplugging them from the wall would be equivalent to pulling a trigger on a person. So it will be illegal to kill them. And of course, at some point, they might start communicating with each other, at which point they could establish their own community that would develop differently than humans. So that's the first very important revolution. And it will have great benefits for humanity because these systems will be able to process large amounts of data much better than humans in a much more objective way. So they can do science, for example, for us. Before they do that, they will they will prescribe medicine. They will fill a lot of tasks that humans are doing right now. And there are many ethical questions about how to incorporate them into society. And I think that, if you go to a university and you look at the classes being offered in philosophy, many of them are digesting what the ancient Greeks were saying. And I think this obsession with the past in philosophy has to be replaced with thinking about the future, because there are so many philosophical and ethical questions that relate to AI systems that must be addressed. So rather than thinking about what ancient Greek philosophers witnessed in their life, we should think about what we are about to witness in our life in the future. And that's a fascinating subject. So that will be a major revolution. And we also would send them into space because they can adapt to changing circumstances. They would have much more patience for interstellar travel. They can go for millions of years, and humans cannot do that in space. And they will be less vulnerable to the hazardous conditions of space because they are not a biological system. So I think the future is with AI astronauts in space. And I'm very proud of our technological kids. But the AI is only the first revolution. The next would be once we learn how to repair the human body so we can extend the longevity of people, the lifespan, well beyond a century. That would also change society in a dramatic way. And the third revolution that I can see is finding evidence for another civilization that already accomplished these tasks. And that's the biggest revolution of them all, because it would change our perspective about our place in the universe, but it would also teach us what our future might be and give us new aspirations. And it will include the AI revolution, because I think most likely the encounter will be with an AI system, not with a biological creature, just for the reasons I mentioned, that it's much better suited for interstellar travel.
That makes absolutely sense. Another question that I would have, I think that I would find very interesting is, I don't know if you're familiar with Ray Kurzweil and his book that he wrote, that he says by 2045, he says that there will be a technological singularity. So he says that we will be technologically so advanced that beyond that point, you cannot tell anymore how developed we will be, where this will go. Do you think that's a realistic scenario due to what you just mentioned, technological change, AI, and biological advancements?
Yeah, I do think we are heading towards a very different future than the past. But even if you look at our present, it's very different than what we used to be. We started in the jungles of Africa and we ended up in apartment buildings in cities. And that's a major shift within 100,000 years. So, of course, the technological advance is accelerating. So many of the new technologies develop exponentially over time, including AI. And so that led Ray to suggest that maybe we will end up in a divergent situation, a singularity where everything will change dramatically. I think this singularity will be modified by, the fact that humans cannot adjust arbitrarily quickly to arbitrarily large changes. So it will be moderated because we just won't be able to cope with vast changes over such a short time. But you already see that we are lagging behind the technology. All the social media that was sprung on humanity, caused a lot of damage because we haven't thought in advance about how to deal with it, how to incorporate the human into all the machines that we are using for social interactions and the algorithm. And it already caused some damage in terms of the mental health of young people and the polarization of societies. It affected politics in a negative way. So I think we already witnessed the fact that if we let technology lead the way without moderating the impact it has on society and trying to make it compatible with the guiding principles that we have, if we don't do that, we are doomed, because we will end up in a very bad situation where a lot of damage will be caused to individuals. And so we are used to damage associated with physical impact, for example, industrial pollution or things like that. And that we say, okay, we understand, we need to moderate that, we need to put laws that reduce the damage to the environment from industrial pollution and so forth. But in the same way, there are a mental aspect or spiritual aspects of technology that are not as visible to us, but they are definitely there in reality. And so those are the things that I mentioned before, that the humanities can help us remedy. And we should make sure that we develop technologies that conform with the human spirit, that help us make the world better. And I think it's impossible to imagine a world just dominated by the machine. The humans will always play an important role in it. And the question is how to interleave the two so that we make progress. And humans will not be the same as they were. We are already different than we used to be. And in the future, let's say 100 years from now, humans will be very different than they are today. And so you can imagine augmenting the human body in many different ways. And but at the same time, I think the future is really with AI more than we will have more free time to pursue whatever gives us pleasure. We already have, we are working less hard. And, if humans did, if you go back centuries ago, and they had shorter lives and we have longer lives. So altogether, the quality of we will have more free time. We will pursue things that we enjoy doing. But AI will help us make progress faster. And I think that going to space is a major change in the way we live. So we will not just be limited to the rock that we were born on by chance. And moreover, we are getting our energy, what people call clean energy, from the sun. The sun is a nuclear reactor. Okay, so in a way, we just happen to be close to it when it's convenient for us. But in fact, when the sun started, it was about a third fainter, and the Earth should have frozen at that time. And the sun is getting hotter and hotter, and within 1 billion years, it will burn up the Earth. And so this is not an ideal situation. You don't want to rely on a nuclear reactor that nature just happened to produce close to you. You want to either board a space station so that you can dial your distance from this nuclear reactor, or you might want to just build your own nuclear reactor and go anywhere, in a safe place where we can flourish and have our own artificial habitat. And I think it will happen in the long distance future, and we will not be, we will remember that we used to be on Earth, but we will be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that is very likely. I would make a short a topic change, because these are two topics I also want to talk about with you. First one would be climate change, because it is something that is also affecting all of us. We see it. It is getting hotter. The summers are getting hotter. The past 8 to 10 years have been the warmest period since we have the climate observations and temperature observations. So how do you think, how well are we prepared to adapt to that climate change with the technologies we have in place and everything that we're trying to do right now? Are we doing enough? Is the US doing enough? Is China doing enough? Because these are also the two countries with the biggest emissions worldwide, next to Russia also. But are we doing enough so far?
Well, I think from a scientific point of view, the solution is very clear, and we know it. We could produce all of our energy needs out of nuclear energy. And nuclear energy has a bad reputation because of the atomic bombs that were used during the Second World War, and also because of a few accidents that the nuclear reactors had. But in principle, if we allocate sufficient funds, and in fact, there are countries that rely mostly on the nuclear energy, like France, for example. But if we dedicate enough attention to building safe nuclear reactors, that's a relatively straightforward path for us not to pollute the atmosphere with all these gases that change the climate. And I think that will be the safest path forward. It doesn't require a lot of work. It's just a question of making it safe and allowing it within our legal system to work at scale. And that's definitely a doable solution. It just surprises me that it's not being adopted by many countries. And of course, the key here is to make it safe and make sure that there is no hazard. And of course, very often people talk about nuclear fusion, not nuclear fission, as if that is safer. I'm not sure about that because, recently, about a month ago, nuclear fusion was demonstrated in the laboratory at Livermore. They used 192 lasers that were focused on a small cavity that ablated the walls of the cavity, created X-rays that basically compressed a pellet through the rocket effect, evaporated the surface of the pellet, and the pellet contracted and reached the threshold for nuclear fusion and released more energy than was invested in it. And so that was the first time that nuclear fusion was demonstrated in the laboratory. But there are huge engineering problems. This approach of inertial confinement fusion is not really practical for generating electricity because the system that had the lasers is bigger than a football field. And the efficiency, if you include the laser energy, the efficiency of the lasers it's really difficult to reach break even, and also you will need to replace the pellets steadily, and so people are thinking about fusion in a magnetic confinement configuration, but again, it's very complicated engineering wise, and there is a fundamental question of whether the walls will not produce radioactivity and at a level that is hazardous. And so in my mind, there is one technology of nuclear energy, which is fission, that works. And the only question is how to make it efficient and safe. And that will be the solution in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would have a question in that context because I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Germany is the first country in Europe that gets rid of all nuclear plants. So we have, I think, 2 still running, but only until this April, and then they're gone. So the plan here would be to go fully on wind and solar. Is that also an alternative for the US and for other countries to completely rely on that only?
Well, it is an alternative as long as it works on the scale that we need it, as long as we can provide all the needs out of that. And that's where I'm not sure about it. And so this is the calculation that depends also on the cost of how much it costs to build the infrastructure in wind. And that's a question, that's a political question, because obviously the cost depends on the amount invested by the government in developing those. But as I said, I don't think that nuclear should be wiped off the table, because this is the method where we are basically using the same approaches as used by stars, except we are using fission instead of fusion. But there is nothing bad about using nuclear energy.
Okay. I would actually now change to another topic, because this is kind of like something I talk about a lot in my podcast, and that we also have to talk about, I think, because it's the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine that is still ongoing and all the time in the news. And firstly, what do you think? How likely is it actually that a nuclear conflict is rising from this conflict? The investments by the US and by the Western coalition into Ukraine are increasing. We are sending more weapons, more tanks. Do you think a risk of a nuclear war is imminent, is immediate, could happen at any time, or is it unlikely?
Yeah, so first I wanted to comment that the Orion spacecraft was sent by NASA to go around the moon, and it took a picture that was just a month and a half ago. It took a picture of the Earth, and the Earth looks like a blue marble. And you will be hard-pressed to find the border between Ukraine and Russia visible on the image of the Earth as a blue marble. So from a distance, the conflicts we have on Earth, even though they fill up the news every day, they are completely meaningless. They are a waste of energy and time, but unfortunately they happen. And now you ask me, how severe can the situation get? And it could get to a nuclear situation, conflict, if Putin and Russia feels that they are with their back to the wall, that this is the last resort for them. Obviously, they will not use it unless they have to, because it's clear that once they use it, it's just like suicide. I mean, it will end up in a retaliation that would be quite severe and very directed at Putin and his government. So far, Russia did not yet suffer losses in its capital, in its own home, so to speak. And that definitely is a big risk if he were to use non-conventional weaponry. And so, but he will do that if he feels that he has no other option, that basically it's the end, close to the end, and he has the capability of doing that. So whether it will happen or not depends on how things develop. The only way to avoid it is if there would be some political arrangement. And without a political arrangement, there is no way that Russia will be willing to accept defeat. And if they're pressed, if one imagines a situation where the Russians are losing more and more and eventually are pressed with their back to the wall, I see that as the most dangerous situation, because at that point they might actually use nuclear weapons. And so I'm very worried about this, because it could be an unstable situation. And obviously the only solution would be finding a political arrangement so that both sides can save face. And that should be the goal, I think, of everyone that is not engaged currently, rather than fueling the conflict and hoping that one side will prevail. I think the goal should be a political arrangement.
Do you think it is possible to negotiate with Putin and with his Minister of Defense and his Foreign Affairs Minister? Are they partners to talk to? Because from as far as I'm concerned, European leaders have tried. They called and they talked with him and they sat down with him, and there were negotiations. But apparently there's no will on the Russian side to actually do something, to actually, they have these goals, these military goals, and if this party does not want to, change their goals, then it's apparently impossible to kind of, talk to them. I mean, it's
That's true.
I mean, I would just say that the West has tried a lot to talk to them and to be diplomatic.
Right. I mean, obviously, it would have been best if this did not start, if some concessions were made ahead of time. But you are completely right that this is time dependent. So if there is an opportunity, it may come in the future. Right now, it doesn't seem to exist for a political arrangement. But in the long term, it's also possible there would be some internal rebellion within Russia, which would resolve the situation. That's another possibility. But at the moment, he's holding strong. And I just hope that we will not get into a situation where indeed he will be with his back to the wall and no other choice but to use nuclear weapons. That would be really terrible for everyone involved. And at the moment, it may continue for a long while in a stalemate. It could be years. It could be more than years. So this is really unfortunate. I mean, it's one of these situations that are rather unfortunate, that it would have been better not to get to them in the first place. But here we are, and my hope is that, at some point, his biological age would change the calculation, that he would not be able to maintain the current course, and he will be open to a political arrangement. That's my hope.
Okay, that's an interesting thought. Towards the end, because we don't have much time left, the similar conflict that the US in particular is looking at, and that might happen in the future, is the one with China. China has the ambition to conquer militarily Taiwan, apparently, in a certain amount of time, after a certain amount of time, to reunite China. as in their perspective, their view. So how do you think, is that a realistic scenario that the West, the US and Europe will be in conflict with China if China tries to attack Taiwan? And
Yeah, this is definitely a possibility, and it all depends on the internal state within China. And as you know, right now they are facing a major challenge with COVID. We don't hear the full report, but in principle, there could be more than 1 million deaths within China within a year, and as a result of COVID. We don't get the full reports, and there would be some pressure on the government, and it's already a situation that is not transparent as to what information is getting all the way to the top and which information is not getting, and whether they will decide, when will they decide to do something about Taiwan, that is unclear. And if they do, then it's another major conflict that could erupt. And obviously the US will come to Taiwan's help. There is no doubt about it. And so it's, there were situations like that in the past where the risks were very high and of a conflict, but nothing really happened because both sides were careful not to escalate. But sometimes it's a matter of a random event that could trigger an explosion. And that's what we should be wary about. I mean, the First World War started this way by some random event. And, also the war in Korea with North Korea started as a result of a misunderstanding. And so many times in history, you see situations that are, susceptible to be ignited, and then a random thing causes the situation to become unstable. So unfortunately, all of these are major concerns, and I do think that humanity faces existential risks on many fronts, and that we are, many of these dangers are self-inflicted wounds. We could have avoided that if we were just more friendly to each other. If trying to conquer a piece of land on Earth is really ridiculous, because there are 10 to the power 20 planets like the Earth in the observable volume of the universe. It has no big significance beyond what we see on this rock. And we are obsessed with it instead of thinking about the vast space, the opportunities there, and instead of working together. And, it's a sign of intelligence is working together, sharing knowledge. That's what science is about. Politics is about separating people and causing them distress because one group of people tries to feel superior relative to other groups of people. And it's, I really regret that we have this dominating the news rather than the spirit of science, of, working together, sharing knowledge, trying to learn more about what lies out there. And my hope is that if I find evidence for an extraterrestrial intelligence, that it will change the calculations of all the people that are currently sucking the oxygen in our room. These are the politicians. Suddenly, the general public will realize there is something more exciting, more uplifting, that is beyond this rock. It's in the third dimension. We are focused on the two-dimensional surface of the Earth, but there is the third dimension of space, and we should think about that. And I hope this will change everything.
Okay, that's a very interesting thought towards the end. Mr. Loeb, I thank you very much for the interview. It was very interesting. And if you would like to use the last minute, you can advertise for yourself, for Harvard University, or anything you would like to advertise. You may use the last minute for that.
Yeah. So the first thing I would like to advertise is for young people to stay young. And the way I define young is that that you're willing to learn something new about reality, not to be too attached to prejudice, to your own ego, but just like a kid trying to explore the world in an open way and learn something new. And very often what happens is, as we grow up, we get attached to ourselves, we develop a reputation that we want to preserve, and it's based on past knowledge. And that's the way the adults often behave. And when I was a kid, I really hated that, because when I would ask difficult questions, the adults in the room would dismiss the question, and just because they didn't know the answer. And I think really the progress that humanity can make in the future is thanks to the spirit of young people that question what we know and try to make progress on what we don't know. And what we know is just an island in an ocean of ignorance. And I talk about that in my book. There is a new book that will come out in August 2023. It's called Interstellar. And I discuss the implications for humanity of thinking more boldly and thinking about space beyond Earth. So this book is called Interstellar. And moreover, I wanted to mention that before summer 2023, I'm going on an expedition to Papua New Guinea to scoop the fragments of the first interstellar meteor. That's an object that came from interstellar space before it was detected 4 years before Oumuamua was discovered. And the US government data indicates, based on the analysis that we did, that it was tougher than all the other space rocks that were ever appeared as meteors. And so it's tougher than iron, and we want to see if it's actually artificial in origin by collecting the fragments from it and studying their composition. So I'm hoping to have an answer to what it was made of and whether it was artificial by next summer.
Okay, then perfect. Thank you very much, and hopefully until next time.